My name's Sid, and I'm just wanted to welcome you all here to listen to George Kourounis. I'm going to be the admin on all this. You're not going to hear a whole lot from me over the course of it, but I just wanted to let you know how this is going to work. Gail is emceeing, Gail Snyder, the Coalition for the Deschutes, founder and executive director, and we'll have her talk a little bit about the coalition, and then Matthew Fetterspiel about Sierra Club, who's Sierra Club, the Juniper group is co-hosting this. And then we're going to turn things over to George, and he will make a presentation. And you're all coming into this muted, and we ask that you stay muted throughout George's presentation. If you unmute yourself for some reason, I will remute you. And if you persist, you'll have to be removed from the meeting, okay? So once George is all done, then we will start taking questions so that you can do Q&A. There are two different ways you can ask a question of George. One is you can just type your question into the chat box, okay? So if you look at if you're on a computer, you move your mouse and down at the bottom of the screen, you've got a chat and participants, okay? Among other things. You just open up that chat panel and type it in. If you would like to actually ask the question yourself, then open up your participants panel, and down at the bottom of that participants panel, there'll be either an icon or a button that says raise hand, and you just click that, your hand will be raised, and then you will be called on to ask your question in the order in which hands are raised, okay? If you're on an iPad or something, that toolbar that has the chat and participants would be at the top of your screen, now at the bottom. Anyway, that's about it from me, and those are the rules, and pretty simple. So I'm gonna now shut up and turn this over to Gail.
Okay, hi everybody. My name's Gail Snyder. That was Sid, my husband, who always follows the rules. So I'm the director of Coalition for the Deschutes. Through our shared vision for the Deschutes, we work with farmers, businesses, recreationists, and other conservation groups to restore the Deschutes River to a healthy condition so that fish farms and families can all thrive. And you can go to our website if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter about upcoming programs. One of our shared vision partners and a really important voice for Central Oregon rivers and environment is the Juniper group of Sierra Club. They're co-hosting our talk, and with that, I'll invite Matthew Fetterspiel to say a few words about the Juniper group.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew, and I'm on the leadership team with the Juniper group of the Sierra Club, and what that means is the Juniper group is the local Bend group that functions to carry out the Sierra Club objectives in terms of conservation and dealing with conservation and environmental issues. What we try to do here is normally during a year we provide a couple campouts that we sponsor, and we also do an education evening, and we do some hikes. So we do all things. In a normal year, we'd be doing a lot of gatherings and group activities. And all of that is to educate as well as to help people express their opinions about issues that might be happening in the community in Oregon, and that includes land issues as well as water issues. And I just want to highlight that our main program at this point is a program we call Keep Waldo Wild, and the goal is to extend or add protection around Waldo Lake. If you've ever been up there, it's one of the most beautiful and cleanest lakes in Oregon, if not the world, and it's just beautiful, and we all should be looking to keep it that way, and that's what we're doing, because there's not quite enough protection around it yet at this point. And with that, if you want to check us out, I'll give you the short URL you can go to check us out. It's bit.ly/Juniper Group. That's bit.ly/Juniper Group, all one word. Thank you. That's on to the next person.
Okay. Now you're back to me. Now I get to introduce George. Sid and I met George in end of like November, December of 2018. We were on a cruise to the Antarctic, and George was there in a host capacity, so he got to ride around and mingle with folks on this trip. And we were really fortunate. We had a number of conversations with George, and it didn't take long to realize that actually he's really crazy. So it was fun for me because I'm married to a crazy person, and to listen to the two of them talk about the various places I've traveled, the things I've done. They were each impressed that the other knew where the Darien Gap is. So if you don't know, you can look it up. So George was actually going to come out to Oregon. When he does, Matthew, you can take him to Waldo Lake. However, we know what's going on, and so instead of coming out here in person, he's going to come in by Zoom. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to George and let him take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Gail and Sid, everyone who's tuning in. So greetings from Toronto, Canada. That's where I live when I'm not traveling most of the time. And so just to put things in context, I don't think I'm crazy. I could be completely self-deluded about that. I do dangerous things in as safe manner as possible. So I'm an explorer, storm chaser, television host. I document extreme forces of nature, and that includes things like tornadoes, hurricanes, erupting volcanoes, avalanches, hail, lightning, basically anything that Mother Nature has in her toolkit that can ruin your day. That's what I like to go and document and then share with the world these things that I see. And the reason why I do it, it's not so much to get an adrenaline rush out of it, although sometimes I do get a thrill out of some of these things. Climbing inside an erupting volcano it'll get your heart pounding. But I do it to show people the really interesting and obscure parts of the world, to get them interested in nature, right? If a kid is going to be interested in dinosaurs, what's their favorite? It's the T-Rex. If they're interested in sharks, they love the great white, right? They like the biggest and baddest. So I particularly like visiting schools and libraries and getting young kids excited about going outside, about learning more about the natural world by showing them some pretty extreme examples of it. So what I've got for you guys today is a bit of a highlights of my past 20 or so years of doing this kind of stuff. So let me share my screen and I'll pull up my presentation here and we'll get right into it. There we go. So my official title is Explorer in Residence with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And I'm also the chapter chair of for Canada of the Explorers Club. And I'm also a National Geographic certified educator and explorer. So I've led expeditions for Nat Geo. This is what it's like when I go to work. So here's a video basically to give you an overview of what I do, and then I'll go into more specifics. Down a little bit there. So from tracking some of the biggest and baddest hurricanes, including Sandy and Katrina, in places like the Bahamas and Bermuda, Florida, Texas, Carolinas, Jamaica, to chasing tornadoes across the Great Plains, places like Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas. To India during the monsoon season, Texas Panhandle, but anything extreme involving nature, so climbing frozen waterfalls, to skiing down sand dunes in Timbuktu, to taking a boat out onto the world's largest lake of sulfuric acid. This is in Indonesia. Australia to India, New Zealand, Iceland, Canadian Arctic, to the radioactive zone of Chernobyl, to the Aral Sea in Uzbekistan. This used to be a fishing village, but the water is now long gone. Lots of tornado chasing over the years. But not just weather, volcanoes as well, geologic forces in places like Java, Hawaii, Italy, South Pacific. And wildlife as well, so diving with sharks, including great whites. Komodo dragon tried to eat me for lunch one day. Swimming with piranhas in Venezuela. Even some space flight training. Haven't been to space yet, though. One of the places I'm going to talk about today is this place, the Crystal Cave in Mexico. Now, I'm not very good at dog sledding. That needs some work. Watch for the cobra attacking the camera. Whew. So that's what it's like when I go to work. And I met Gail and Sid, as she mentioned, in Antarctica aboard the RCGS Resolute. I was acting as ambassador for the Geographical Society aboard that voyage. And it was my fourth time to Antarctica. I love it down there so much. It is just so unbelievably beautiful. I tell people that you can just close your eyes and take a bunch of pictures, and every single one of them is going to turn out like a postcard. If you ever get the opportunity, or if you're ever able to make the opportunity to go to Antarctica, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is just a place beyond compare. And one of the few last places on Earth where you can go and stand somewhere where no one has ever been, right? There's not that much left to explore here on planet Earth. There's still a few places, some deep caves, the oceans, of course, parts of Antarctica, some jungle areas and things. But there's no new continents to discover, right? But for me, exploration is all about documenting these points in time that are never going to happen again, while the tornado is touching down, or the hurricane is making landfall, or while the volcano is erupting. And I've always been a curious kid, probably sometimes a little too curious for my own good. And it really worked out well for me. I moved to Toronto when I was in my early 20s. Before that, my heroes were guys like Jacques Cousteau, who of course was an ocean explorer. I grew up watching his TV programs and reading his books. But my other main influence growing up was Indiana Jones. So when you combine those two people together, you sort of end up with a guy like me. But being in Toronto really worked out well in terms of a passion for the weather. We get some really varied weather here because of the influence of the Great Lakes, and we get a lot of thunderstorms here in the summer. And the CN Tower, which is the tallest structure, one of the tallest structures in the world, gets struck by lightning between 70 to 100 times per year. So that's sort of really what sparked my interest, pun intended, in documenting extreme forces of nature and extreme weather in particular. So I could literally just ride my bike down to the waterfront in the pouring rain and get pictures like this. So it was really just quite a good place for me to be. So I've been doing that part-time. Basically, I was working as an engineer building recording studios for a living, and then taking my vacation time to go and chase storms. And I went to Oklahoma and started chasing tornadoes, and I started chasing hurricanes. And every year I would do a little bit more and a little bit more. And then a TV producer called me one day and asked if I wanted to basically make a show out of what I was already doing. And so we put together this TV show idea called Angry Planet. and we ended up making 50 episodes of this show, and we filmed it all over the world, from Africa to the South Pacific to Siberia. We were in the coldest town in the world in the middle of winter, this little place called Oymyakon. From Cape Verde to Antarctica to Alaska, all over the world. And I've been very, very fortunate to have these great opportunities to go to about 75 countries, every continent, numerous times. And I try to never take that for granted. I really miss travel right now. It's killing me to be stuck at home. But it really hit its stride when I started chasing tornadoes in the US. In America, you guys get 75% of the world's tornadoes, between 800 to 1,200 per year. And the peak of tornado season is right now. If I wasn't here or in Oregon, I would be in Nebraska or Kansas right now. The last 2 weeks of May is really the best peak climatologically in terms of tornadoes. So I saw my first tornado in 1998. And then I've been going back pretty much every year since to try and forecast the weather, document these tornadoes, and again, share what I've seen with as many people as possible through television, through the web, through speaking engagements. And I spent, let me think here for a second, 12 years? Yeah, 12 years working as a tornado chasing tour guide. So we would take people from around the world, they'd hop in a van, we'd pick them up at the airport in Oklahoma, and we'd take them to go and see tornadoes all over the Great Plains. So we would put it on like 5,000 miles in 2 weeks, just driving around trying to forecast the weather, which is very complicated. Trying to find a tornado, you have to be there before the tornado ever even forms. And sometimes they've got that classic sort of slender elephant trunk look, and sometimes they're just big and wide and this ugly wedged mean shape. The biggest tornado that we ever documented was world record size, 2.6 miles wide at its widest. It just looked like a smudge across the landscape. And so we would try to safely bring guests with us, kind of like a mountain guide. If you're a mountain guide working on the Matterhorn or working on Mount Everest, it's the same kind of idea. You take precautions and you try to bring people to see what they want to see. In this case, tornadoes. And sometimes they're on the ground for only seconds. And then sometimes they are on the ground for an hour or more, but they're extremely difficult to find. And the weather conditions have to be just right. You need just the right amount of moisture. You need the right amount of wind shear. That's where the wind is changing direction at different altitudes and getting faster as you go higher up in the atmosphere, things like that. So when we're successful, it's very rewarding. And I've got a little video clip here. This is from South Dakota. And again, I was guiding for a tornado chasing tour group called Cloud9 Tours. And well, I'll let the video speak for itself, because this beautiful tornado touches down in a field, not harming anyone, which is exactly what we want to see. We never want to see these tornadoes hitting a town.
I got a crazy idea. What? Yeah. Let's do it.
So I'm convincing my chase partner to get back in the van and now drive
Great tornado. Holy smokes.
try to intercept this tornado where we know it's going to cross the road, but we don't know exactly where yet.
Long-lived violent tornado. No sign of letting up.
So now we're trying to figure out, okay, where is it going to cross? It's going to pass just behind this little building. And as I open the car door to take some photos, the wind is so strong that it starts sucking all of the maps. Everything gets sucked out of the van. Now watch the oncoming headlights. This driver must have been, I don't know what they were thinking, but this car practically drove right into this tornado. I don't know if they missed it, they didn't see it. Maybe they were texting while they were driving, or maybe they did see it at the last minute and maybe they needed a new pair of underwear, because I know I sure would have. A car is actually a pretty dangerous place to be in a tornado because it will crumple the car and throw it like a Coke can. The safest place to be, of course, is underground. If there's a tornado warning that's issued for your area, get underground or get into a reinforced area, a bathroom or an interior closet if you don't have a basement, something like that. But that guy, woof, talk about oblivious driver. But then, of course, there are storms that are even bigger than tornadoes. Tornadoes have the fastest wind speeds in the world, but they're not the biggest storms. Those go to, that prize goes to hurricanes. Now, hurricanes, tropical cyclones, and typhoons are all the same thing. We just give them different names when they happen in different parts of the world. If you live in Japan or Taiwan or the Philippines, you're going to call it a typhoon. If you live in North America, we call it a hurricane. If you live in Australia or the South Pacific or India, you call it a cyclone. But it really all means the exact same thing. These giant rotating clusters of storms with that calm eye in the middle. And this particular hurricane was Hurricane Katrina. It was Category 5 at this point when the satellite image was taken. And I had been in numerous hurricanes before Katrina hit. And I kind of knew what to expect, but the actual experience of riding out the strongest part of Hurricane Katrina, it was basically like being in a blender for an entire day. Every drop of rain stung like someone was poking you with a needle, and every little bit of gravel that was flying through the air felt like a bullet almost. And so I was in a steel reinforced concrete parking garage with about a half a dozen other colleagues that I'd met up with, from some from Florida, some from New York, some from Canada. And we found this one building, and it was very sturdy, steel reinforced concrete. We thought it could survive pretty much anything. And oh boy, did we get a wild ride. And here's a bit of video from Hurricane Katrina. So this is Gulfport, Mississippi. This is just east of New Orleans. And when the sun came up, the winds started to accelerate a little more and a little more. Next thing you know, debris is flying everywhere. And it just got progressively worse and worse as the day went on. Roofing shingles flying everywhere. The rain itself at some point sometimes was actually even blowing upward. And there were pieces of sheet metal flying around like helicopter blades. I call this the decapitator. So we were basically hunkered down in this garage. And at the peak of the storm, we were getting winds that were 120 miles an hour. So imagine driving at double highway speed with your face out the window in the rain for 6 or 7 hours. That's basically what it felt like. And then the water came in. That's the storm surge flooding. This is basically a lump of seawater that the storm winds push inland. And the sea level rose 28 feet above normal during Hurricane Katrina. That's almost the height of a 3-story building. We were about a half a mile inland here at this parking garage, so the water didn't get really deep where we were, and we could drive our cars up to the top layers of the top levels of the parking garage to keep our cars from getting flooded with seawater. But the wind was so intense that I couldn't even stand up. To get from place to place, we literally had to crawl across the ground. Basically hiding behind anything that we could. At the end of the day, your ears are just ringing because it's this unrelenting sound. And basically everything in Gulfport was more or less destroyed. there was a floating casino barge that was lifted by the waves and dropped into its own parking lot. There was a bank building, and the only reason that we knew that it was a bank building was because the vault was left behind. Everything else was gone. The building was gone. It was in the Walmart. The bank building was in the Walmart down the street. The only thing that remained was the reinforced bank vault. So that gives you an idea of how powerful these storms can be. And it was the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. So really, really sobering and intense. We didn't know how bad it was because all the cell networks were down and that until I was halfway home and I started hearing these news reports about what had happened in New Orleans. We chose not to go to New Orleans because we didn't want to get flooded in. And also the weak side, the weaker winds were actually hitting New Orleans. We wanted to be where the strongest part was, which was in Gulfport. So it's really interesting how this sort of played out. As soon as I got home, though, I had 6 TV news crews waiting to do interviews because they wanted to talk to this, crazy guy that was driving into it while millions of people were trying to get away from it. But that footage has been seen by millions of people all over the world now, and hopefully reinforcing the idea that if you are given the orders to evacuate and you don't, then this is the kind of stuff that you will have to endure, and you may not make it through it because these can be so destructive. I've been through like 20 hurricanes, so I know all these techniques and safety precautions to take, right? But not everyone does. Now, moving on from weather, volcanoes. I absolutely love volcanoes. And when we were in Antarctica, we got to go to a place called Deception Island. And it is an active volcano in Antarctica. There are at least 3 active volcanoes in Antarctica. And the one that we visited, you can pull the ship right into it and anchor inside the crater of the volcano. And then we took Zodiacs ashore, and you stick your hand in the sand, and it's hot to the touch because there's still hot water flowing underneath the beach, the black sand beach. It's really amazing. And it could have erupted at any time. So basically, if it's not exploding, it can still be considered active. I prefer them when they're actually erupting, of course. And the one that's on the screen right now is Krakatoa, probably one of the most notorious volcanoes in the world. Back in 1883, this volcano had such a huge explosion that it was the loudest sound that was ever documented ever. There were people 2,000 kilometers away in Australia that heard the sound of this thing exploding. Unbelievable. It created a tsunami that killed 36,000 people. Even to this day, it's still active. And when I was there, it was producing these small ash eruptions that would occasionally cause lightning bolts inside the ash because the ash particles rub together and create friction, kind of like dragging your feet across the carpet and then touching a doorknob. Very similar, but millions of times more powerful. So it's really interesting. Volcanoes, I find them fascinating because they're the only force, or one of the only forces in the world, I guess, that is capable of producing and destroying. The Hawaiian Islands are made bigger almost every year because of lava pouring into the ocean, right? So land is being created by these volcanoes, but yet they can also be tremendous forces of destruction. And I find that dichotomy between those two concepts to be fascinating to me. And so I spent a lot of time visiting volcanoes. And my favorite place to do that is in Vanuatu. It's a small archipelago of islands in the South Pacific that most people couldn't find on a map if their life depended on it. It's between Fiji and Australia, and they have some of the most active volcanoes in the world there. And they have these lakes of lava, particularly on this one island called Ambrum. And that's where this photo was taken. That is me at the bottom. I've got a special heat protective suit that I have custom tailor-made for me. And it's kind of like a suit that you would wear if you worked in a foundry or a smelting plant or something like that. And it helps reflect some of that heat back. So to get to this point, we had to fly from Canada to Vanuatu, helicopter into this island, set up a base camp at the summit. We were there for several weeks, rigging ropes, and then rappelled down inside the active crater to where the lake of boiling lava was at the bottom. And that crater is so deep, it's 1,200 feet deep, or 400 meters. That's deeper than the height of the Empire State Building. So imagine being on a rope and rappelling off of this Empire State Building down into a pit where there's a boiling mass of liquid rock at the bottom. It's pretty intimidating, to say the least. But it is one of the most beautiful, fascinating places in the world. A still picture does not do it justice. You got to see video of this, which I'm going to show you in a few seconds. There's no green screen here. This is not CGI, no Photoshop. This is 100% real.
The bottom of Maru volcanoes.
And this thing boils away 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
At the same time, it's also one of the most dangerous and difficult to get to.
It's like staring into the sun at close range. There's only about a half a dozen lakes of lava on planet Earth at any given time. There's even fewer right now. This lava lake doesn't exist anymore. The lava actually drained out of it about 1.5 years ago, and it hasn't come back yet. I've done numerous expeditions to this volcano, and I've done 11 descents down to the bottom. To give you an idea of scale, there I am down at the very bottom of the frame. It's about 60 meters across, and pretty intense, to say the least. The most dangerous part isn't the lava, actually. What's more dangerous is actually the falling rocks and the gas. So I'm wearing a gas mask. Here's a little selfie I took down at the bottom. This ended up on CNN. It ended up on these lists of like most extreme selfies of the year or whatever. Anyway, the gas that is produced by the lava, a lot of it is hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide gas. It's very acidic. And whenever it rains, which it does all the time there, the raindrops pick up the acidity of the gas and you get rained on with extremely strong acid rain. We were measuring like pH of 1, like battery acid strength. So anything that was metal, my suit, the screws on my camera, any jewelry that you're wearing, anything metal, tripod, gets disintegrated by this extremely strong acid rain. And we set up our base camp upwind so that most of the time the wind is blowing that gas away from us, but every now and then it'll blow into our base camp. And it's like living on the moon. At night, the lava causes the sky to glow orange, and there's no plants, there's nothing alive up there, and spending weeks up there at a time is really difficult, but also just amazing. It's about the closest thing that you can experience to going to another planet. Well, actually, this place and the next 2 places I'm going to show you because it gets crazier. We're just ramping up. So we started off kind of crazy with chasing tornadoes, and then got a little crazier with hurricanes. Then we ratcheted things up a little more with volcanoes, and now we're going to take things to the next level. Caves, not just any old cave, but probably the most extreme cave on planet Earth. The Nika Crystal Cave in Mexico. You got a little preview of this in the intro video. It's in the desert of Chihuahua State, Mexico. And it was accidentally discovered in the year 2000, 900 feet underground by silver miners who accidentally broke through from their silver mine into this chamber. And it's about the size of a basketball court. And it's filled with the largest crystals in the world. Some of them are 55 tons and 30 feet long. They're basically tree trunks made out of crystallized gypsum. They're selenite crystals. So it looks like ice. It kind of looks like Superman's Fortress of Solitude, right? It's mind-blowing how beautiful this place is. But it's as dangerous as it is spectacular. The air temperature inside is at least 122 to 124 degrees Fahrenheit with 100% humidity. So you've got the heat of the Sahara Desert combined with the humidity of the Amazon jungle. And it is fatal. You will die. if you spend more than about 20 minutes inside this cave. You know how when you open up a cold beer on a humid day, you get all that condensation that happens on the outside of the beer can? Well, guess what? Your body temperature is cooler than the air temperature there. And all that humidity wants to condense on something that's cooler, like the inside of your lungs. So you can drown inside this cave because of the condensation that can form inside your lungs. So in order to explore this cave, we had to have specialized equipment. We've got suits that are filled with an ice-filled vest to keep our body core temperature down. And then we've got these protective coveralls over top, trying to keep that cooling, the ice cooling in. And then the backpack that I'm wearing is also filled with ice canisters, and there's a little electric fan that blows air over top of the ice canisters and then into like a fighter pilot's mask so that we can breathe chilled air. And even with all of that protective equipment, we could still only go in for about 40 to 45 minutes at a time. And after that, all the ice is melted in the suit. You have to leave and go to the nice cool area, which is about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And believe me, it's a refreshing 95 when you're in like 120 with 100% humidity, right? It's absolutely insane. We had to preheat our cameras. We had to put them in plastic bags, bring them into the cave and let them warm up to ambient temperature. Otherwise, fog and condensation would have formed on all of the electronics and the lenses, and they would have ruined the cameras. We actually did ruin a camera in there, even with those protective measures. And so because this cave is privately owned by the mining company whose property it's on, it took us 2 years to get permission to go here for 1 day of filming. We made an episode of Angry Planet in this cave, and it was very expensive. It was very difficult. We had to have an ambulance standing by at the surface. We had to have a doctor down with us taking our vitals every time we went into the cave and every time we came out. They measured our blood oxygen, they measured our blood pressure, making sure that we were okay. They kept track of every minute that we were in this cave. It was just mind-blowing. Every cell in your body is screaming at you to leave. It's so uncomfortable, so oppressive. The heat hits you like a sledgehammer, but it's also so spectacular that your eyes and your brain want you to linger. But you know if you stay, you will die. You literally start to die as soon as you enter this cave, and it's only a matter of time. And basically, the reason why it's so hot and humid is because deep below this cave, there's a volcanic chamber of magma. And there's no active volcanoes in the area currently, but that old magma chamber is still there, and it heats up the groundwater. And the groundwater is what causes the oppressive heat and humidity. And the mine actually pumps out a lot of the groundwater because they actually mine deeper than the water table there in Mexico. So a few years ago, there was an accident. There was a flash flood, and some of the pumping equipment was damaged, and the cave actually flooded again. And I believe it's still flooded now. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's still flooded. So it's impossible to visit again, at least for the time being. But having the opportunity to go there was just tremendous. The crystals themselves are actually quite soft. They're kind of about as hard as your fingernails. So you have to be very, very careful not to fall and hurt yourself, but also not to damage the crystals. And of course, we didn't take anything. We left nothing but footprints and took nothing but photos. But yeah, if anyone asks me where's the most beautiful place that I've ever visited, it's got to be this place. Not just because of the beauty, but also because of the difficulty and danger that was involved with getting even just the tiniest glimpse of visiting this cave. It's basically a geode that you can walk around in. That's essentially what it is. Now I've got one more expedition story for you guys, and we're gonna ratchet it up one more notch. What do you say? So we're gonna kick it up. We're gonna take it from 10 to 11. And I want to talk about an expedition that I did for National Geographic. I've been wanting to work with these guys for many, many years. And I pitched them an idea about 5 years ago. a crazy idea that I didn't even know if I could do it, but I wanted to try. I sent them in the idea, and the fools, they said yes. So let me set up this. Indulge me for a moment. Let me set up the whole idea here properly. So I wanted to go to the country of Turkmenistan. Now, Sid, raise your hand. Have you been to Turkmenistan? No, you have not. Okay, but you've been Afghanistan, a bunch of other places. Turkmenistan is one of the least visited countries in the world. It gets about a third the number of visitors that North Korea gets every year. So nobody goes there. It's just north of Iran. It's between Iran and Uzbekistan. And it's an oppressive regime, very similar to North Korea. The former leader of Turkmenistan renamed the days of the week after his family members and his favorite books, including one that he wrote. He enacted all these crazy laws. And the one resource they have in Turkmenistan is natural gas. So there was a drilling operation that was drilling for natural gas out in the Karakum Desert. And the drilling rig encountered a sinkhole, and the entire rig collapsed into this sinkhole. Now, the problem is, of course, is that it was leaking methane, right? Methane is the main component of natural gas. So instead of bringing in a special response team to cap the well and deal with it in a proper manner, well, they just lit it on fire, thinking that it would burn off in a couple of days. That was in 1971, and it's still burning today. You may have seen pictures of this place on Facebook or on YouTube. It's called Darvaza, and the locals refer to it as the doorway to hell. Darvaza just means doorway. And so the plan was to not just go here, right? I wanted to go and do something more important. And one of the things that I do is I'm not just a videographer and photographer. I'm not a scientist, but I do a lot of work with scientists because I have the skills and abilities and the tools and the network to be able to go to places where scientists either deem too difficult or too dangerous to gather samples and things like that. So sometimes I'll work with other scientists to gather lava samples or do tornado research, things like that. I'm actually supposed to be in Tornado Alley right now working with some storm researchers from California. But here I am in my office. But anyway, so what I wanted to do here is, well, the way I pitched it to National Geographic is this. NASA has discovered planets outside of our solar system that have hot methane-rich environments, similar to what we have in this crater. So if I could go here to this crater and discover any type of microscopic bacteria, extremophile bacteria, we call them. These extremophiles live in conditions that are what we would consider inhospitable, too hot, too cold, too acidic, whatever. If we could find anything living down inside this pit, it could give us clues as to where we might want to look for life on other planets. So basically looking for alien life here on Earth. How cool is that? So that was the idea that I pitched to Nat Geo. They said yes. I had a science grant from the National Geographic Society, and I had a team from the television side of things to film the whole thing. Now I just had to figure out how on earth am I going to do this? And because Turkmenistan is so much like North Korea, very oppressive, it took over a year and a half to get permission to go here from the government. I had a lot of help from Nat Geo. I had a lot of help from the US Embassy in Turkmenistan, in the capital of Ashgabat. But it finally came together. I had my small team of my people from Canada, the TV crew. We flew into Turkmenistan. And there's two ways that you could do this, really. You could have a special heat-resistant robot that you could put down into the crater to take some samples of the soil, bring them back, and then do a DNA analysis. Or you could do it the hard way, which, of course, I did. This was our base camp. And instead of dropping a robot down inside, I was going to go down inside personally and do this. So I had a microbiologist from the University of Chicago with me. I had my rope rigging team, and we stretched fire-resistant ropes across the entire span of the crater. It's about 230 feet across and about 100 feet deep. And by the way, the best fire pit at night. It is so beautiful. It's amazing. And our cool thing that happens here, I can take a little detour here. At night, there are moths that are attracted to the light of the fire. And then there are birds that fly down into the crater to catch the moths. So you can actually watch these small flocks of birds hunting for moths that are attracted to the crater at night. Super, super cool. Anyway, I digress. So the plan was stretch fire-resistant ropes across the crater, go out to the middle on pulleys, rappel down with my special heat-resistant suit. I had a special harness made out of Kevlar, which is the same material that they make bulletproof vests out of, because a regular harness would have melted. I had self-contained air, like a firefighter would wear. Getting air tanks filled in Turkmenistan was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in terms of logistics. Like, it was so difficult. I almost didn't have air for this expedition. Kind of important to have air. So, feeling very much like a baked potato out on a laundry line, we spent days rigging everything up. We did all kinds of tests. What we learned was cooler air was dropping down in the center of the crater. It was then getting heated by the fires and then convecting up around the edges, kind of like a giant donut, a big convection oven. So the safest and coolest place to drop down was dead center in the middle of the crater. Now, it just so happens visually for television that looked, really cool as well. So it worked out from a safety perspective and also from a visual perspective. Going down in the middle was the best option. I had radio communications to the team up at the crater rim so that the microbiologist could tell me where to gather samples. And as I was digging with a little trowel, fire was coming out of the hole that I was digging because new vents were opening up. It was intense, to say the least. So here's a wide angle view. And you can see there's thousands of little fires and then a couple of big fires at the middle. Now, look really closely. See if you can spot me. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo picture. I'm going to zoom in. There I am next to the big, the biggest fire. Now I'm going to zoom back out again. Look just to the right. So that gives you an idea of the sense of scale. The fire sounded like a jet engine roaring. And when you're standing at the bottom, it was just, I describe it as being like a coliseum of fire. No human had ever been down to the bottom of this thing. And what I'd like to tell students is that if you're the best at something, someone is always going to come along and be better than you. But if you're the first to do something, nobody can ever take that away from you, right? Who was the best Apollo astronaut? You can't even judge. You can't say who's the best astronaut, but you know who the first to land on the moon was, right? So sometimes it's better to be first than best. Now, I've got a little video clip. Oh, I didn't mention. So the team from the TV crew from National Geographic that was with me, we were filming this expedition for part of a bigger TV series. And at the last minute, they told me the name of the series. The series was called Die Trying. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. The guys sitting in Washington at the head office in their suits behind their desks aren't the guys that are going to be trying. It's going to be me putting my butt out there on the rope. So I protested the name of the show, but I got vetoed. I got downvoted pretty quick. So anyway, I've got a clip here from the show Die Trying. So here we are at the bottom. There's some of the fire coming up out of the hole. I had 17 minutes of time down there. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Green, I've got a drill sample for you from near this big fire vent. What I'm going to do now is try and deploy a typical vent. Wow, that thing is intimidating. George must take temperature readings and soil samples to document the conditions under which extreme life forms may exist. All right, temperature's going up. Having trouble getting it in. Ah, it's hot. Oh, very hot, very hot. Temperature reading, please. Temperature reading, 400. 400 degrees
Celsius. 750 Fahrenheit. That's pizza oven hot.
You have 6 minutes of air. Start your way out. I'm not coming up yet. I have to grab the fire camera. We have to start the expectation. We need to start getting you up.
I hope he survives. So the best feeling in the world is having your buddies haul you up and out of there. It was just an overwhelming experience. It's the closest thing to setting foot on another planet that I'll ever experience. And yes, we found several types of bacteria living at the bottom of the crater that were not in the existing DNA database. And some of them were even metabolizing or consuming the methane gas. So really interesting exotic bacteria living at the bottom of that crater. So at some point, future generations may send a probe to a planet outside of our solar system, and hopefully the data that I collected on this expedition will help us determine where to send those probes and maybe even find life on another planet. Even if it's bacterial life forms, it would still be one of the biggest discoveries in modern science. So if you want to learn more, I got tons and tons more. What I showed you guys tonight is about 5%. There's so much more. FuriousEarth.com is my website. Let me just turn off my screen sharing here. And yeah, I mean, there's just so many crazy expeditions. I see a question in the chat about the camera, about working with different camera people. Yeah, absolutely. I worked with this one cameraman particularly for many years during Angry Planet days. Peter Rowe was his name. He was the producer and the main cameraman and director. I was on camera, the host of the show, and I also operated a camera. So a lot of the time it was just him and I going out on these expeditions. Every now and then we'd have maybe a third person with us. So we were able to keep the TV crew really small so that we could be flexible and change our plans on a moment's notice. For example, we were in New Zealand one time, and nearby in Tonga, a volcano erupted out of the sea and formed a brand new island. So we dropped all of our filming plans in New Zealand, hopped on a plane, flew to Tonga, chartered a really terrible fishing boat that was just completely unseaworthy, went out and became some of the first people to set foot on this brand new, newest land on Earth. So I like to work with camera operators that I know and trust, because you never know when someone is gonna, you know, freak out in a crazy situation. But I've had really good success. All the people I've worked with have been just fantastic, and I have a lot of respect for guys that are following me around with a camera, because they got to haul this big camera around, and I feel very responsible for their safety because they can't always see what's going on, right? So we have to really look out for each other. And then a lot of the times I'll just have to film myself because where I'm going is sometimes just too dangerous. In that fire pit, there was no other camera person in the pit with me. So I had a camera that I placed down. I had 2 cameras mounted on me, and then the other cameramen were up top filming down. How long I've been doing this and how things changed over the years. Over 20 years now. I started chasing tornadoes in 1998. Was my first year doing that. So it's been over 20 years now. And interesting, people ask me a lot about how things have changed in terms of climate change and things like that. We're seeing some evidence of sea ice levels in the Arctic and how they're affecting tornadoes. We might be seeing tornadoes shifting a little further east now, maybe. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done on that. But the thing is, as these tornadoes potentially shift further east from places like Oklahoma and Kansas to places like Missouri and Indiana, there's higher population densities. So there's more potential for people to be negatively impacted by these tornadoes, right? They only become natural disasters when they affect people, right? A hurricane spinning out in the ocean, is not a natural disaster. It's a natural phenomenon. A tornado touching down is not a natural disaster until it hits a town. So it's really us that becomes the factor that determines whether they become disasters or not. Where to next? Well, I'm supposed to be tornado chasing right now. That was the plan. And I'm supposed to be going back to Iceland next month, but I don't think that's going to happen. The next big expedition is supposed to be in September, and it's going to be Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and then back to Vanuatu. I got my fingers crossed that that might happen. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I give it maybe a 50-50 chance of happening. Hurricane season officially kicks off on June 1st, although we've already had a tropical storm. Tropical Storm Arthur is actually spinning out there in the Atlantic right now. It's very weak and it's not going to hit anybody. So who knows, from June through to mid-October to beginning of November is basically hurricane season. So I may end up, if the border opens up between Canada and the US, which it's not going to for another month at least, then hopefully I'll be down in Florida or the Carolinas or somewhere on the Gulf Coast. We'll see. If you get too close to a tornado in a car, oh, hold on, let me skip back one. Does bacteria from the fire pit survive in the cooler temps without methane away from the pit? Okay, great question. So what we had to do to study these bacteria, because they don't survive unless they're in those particular conditions, is the microbiologist, Dr. Green, Stefan Green, who was with me. He has a DNA lab in Chicago, but he was able to bring some equipment out with him. And he was able to use this equipment to basically pulverize the bacteria using this special shaking machine that he had. And basically what it was able to do is stabilize the DNA samples for transport at room temperature. And then once he was able to get that to his lab, then he could run the full spectrum of DNA tests on it. So yeah, we had to do some work in the field, in our tents, beside the fire pit in order to prepare those samples to come back to the lab. Great question. And then if you get too close to a tornado in a car, what should you do to protect yourself? Well, GTFO, get out of there if you can. So here's a little hint. If you see a tornado, let's say a tornado's there, and it's not moving to the left, and it's not moving to the right, it just is getting bigger, that means it's coming straight for you. So what you probably want to do is drive at right angles if you can. If you have the peace of mind, the wherewithal, the situational awareness, try to drive at right angles to the tornado. Get out of its way. If you can't, then get out of your car, get away from your car so it doesn't roll over on you. Try to get into a building if you can. If you can't, get to a low spot, get as low as you can, cover your head, hope for the best. If you can't do that, get down as low in your car as you can. Try and sort of scrunch down by the pedals if you can. That way, if the car does get picked up and rolled, you might be a little bit more protected. It's a bad situation. There's no good thing to do in that situation, but you're trying to make the best of whatever situation you have. And yes, I've been hit by weak tornadoes, and it's freaking scary. With all the videos, is there a blooper reel? I should really dig through. I'm going to show you here. I have got stacks of hard drives just full of video, terabytes and terabytes. And yes, I have it all backed up a couple of times. I have all my hard drives there, and then I have a safety backup over here, and then I've got a third backup that I keep at a friend's house just in case my house burns down. So super redundant. But for me to find the time to be able to dig through all those and make blooper reels, it would be fun, but boy, that would be a lot of work. I need to hire some film students or something to do that for me. But yeah, there's lots of outtakes, me making mistakes and funny things happening on camera. What haven't I done that I want to? Ooh, great question. So earlier I was talking about volcanoes in Antarctica and how Sid and Gail and we visited Deception Island. Well, it turns out that there are a couple of other volcanoes in Antarctica, and it turns out 2 of those volcanoes are the rare type that have lakes of lava. Mount Erebus is one of them. It's on Ross Island, sort of on the New Zealand side of Antarctica. And then there's another one called Mount Michael. Mount Michael, people have set foot on Mount Michael, but no human has ever climbed to the summit of Mount Michael. And it was only recently discovered by satellite imagery that there was a hot spot at the top inside the crater. So there's a lake of lava inside that crater that no human has ever seen. So that is the #1 thing on my list. I don't know if it's even possible. Of course it's possible. I don't know how difficult it would be to organize that expedition, how expensive it would be. But if I had an unlimited budget and unlimited resources, that is what I would definitely want to do. There's a few places that are a little easier that I haven't been to that I want to go to. I've never been to Mongolia. I really want to go there. There's a boiling river in Peru that I really want to document. Very bizarre phenomenon there. It's the only one in the world. So yeah, every time I check something off the bucket list, I sort of add 2 more at the bottom. I don't think I'm ever going to run out. Worst injury. Knock on wood, I have never been hospitalized from any injury that I've had from any of my adventures. No broken bones. My cameraman broke his finger one time. We were filming on a ski hill and he sunk down in the snow and dislocated his finger, busted it up. That was the worst thing that ever happened on a film shoot. I had a weird experience in North Korea. I was there 3 years ago, and I was mountain climbing in North Korea. So yes, it was complicated. Yes, it was difficult, but it was pretty amazing, actually. Some parts of North Korea that, very few people go there to begin with. But on top of that, we were in some places that nobody but the locals get to see. But I've had a history of requiring hernia operations. I've had a couple of them in the past. And while I was in North Korea, climbing the side of Mount Kumgang, I had on the right side inguinal hernia start to happen. So there was a weakness in the muscle wall, and now part of my small intestine is poking out through my abdomen. So I'm in North Korea with no travel insurance, no health insurance, because as soon as you set foot in North Korea, all your insurance is null and void. And I have to reach down into my pants every 10 minutes to push my intestines back into my abdomen. And just hoping that nothing got twisted or strangulated. And when I got home, I had to go and get surgery. But yeah, that was probably the weirdest medical thing that I've had happen while out on an expedition, pushing my intestines back in my body on a mountain in North Korea. And that was my vacation. I wasn't even making a TV show. I was just doing that for fun because I could. Dealing with methane in your house? Well, hey, it's a naturally occurring gas. It's funny. Methane in its pure form, methane actually is colorless and odorless. At the fire crater in Turkmenistan, it really didn't smell that much. There was, if you looked in the video, there was no smoke. It burns really cleanly there. And while we were there, the government officials that were with us were telling us that they were going to try to drill nearby and try and basically tap into that reservoir of methane to try and, sell it because it's worth money, right? But now, interestingly, that fire pit has become a tourist attraction. And I think partly because of my efforts there, because it's been seen all over the world. I was just there again. I went back to Turkmenistan just under a year ago, last summer. And they've developed the area. There's a pathway, and there's some campground there, and there's a toilet, and there's a fence around the crater now. So I'm glad that more people are seeing it, but I'm disappointed at what's happened there. It was really heartbreaking for me to go visit and see a fence around the thing. But I get it. They don't want people falling in. Oh, and by the way, I received a Guinness Book World Record for being the first person to ever set foot at the bottom of that crater. It's proudly hanging above my desk.
So,
does anyone have any non-chat questions?
if someone, you can use the raise hand feature if you just want to ask the question directly. Otherwise, we can turn this back over to Gail. All right. Seeing no hands raised. Oh, here we go.
Oh, what was Chernobyl like? I see on there. Chernobyl was amazing. I was there about 10 years ago, before the new sarcophagus was put over top of the reactor. And at one point, we were only allowed, we got within about 100 yards of the reactor, and we were told that we were only allowed to stay in that one spot for 15 minutes and no more. Walking through the town of Pripyat, which was the town that housed all of the workers, was like something from a post-apocalyptic zombie movie. You're expecting a horde of the undead to come around the corner, just dilapidated buildings and plants and trees growing up in the sidewalks, and walking through the school and the hospital, going to the maternity ward and seeing all these rusting cribs and radioactive paint peeling off the walls, and you don't want to touch anything, but it's just so eerie. It really is bizarre.
All right. Theo, would you like to say
Sure.
some words?
Is there a good documentary on Chernobyl recently?
There was of course, the HBO series, I think it was on HBO, about Chernobyl, which I haven't seen actually. I've heard this very, very good. But there's been many documentaries made about the accident in Chernobyl back in 1986.
So you're back to me. If there are no other questions, hurry if you have something. Otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap up. Sid has recorded this, so you can watch it again if you want to and share it with your friends. George, thank you so much. And actually, all you've done is reaffirm what I said at the beginning, is that, yeah, you're crazy. And we're glad that you didn't die trying, that you're still alive to tell these tales. And I do think that you deserve Guinness World Records, Guinness Book of World Records on many levels, not just for descending into the doorway to hell. And if there were the opportunity for a world record for crazy, then I think you take the cake. With that, maybe we can go back to George and just bid him a good evening in Toronto and say thank you once again so very much.
And George, there is one other question if you'd like to answer it.
Yeah, I see in the chat there about have I been to Bangladesh during cyclone season? There's actually a cyclone bearing down on Bangladesh and eastern part of India near Calcutta right now. It was a category 5 at one point, but it has weakened down, so it shouldn't be too bad there. But I have been to Bangladesh. I was there during their monsoon season, and monsoon isn't a storm; it's a season. Think of it as the rainy season. So you've got a monsoon season in India and Bangladesh. You have a monsoon season even in places like Arizona in August, when you get that moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. They get thunderstorms and beautiful lightning. I've been to Arizona numerous times to photograph lightning there during their monsoon season. So yeah, Bangladesh and India, I've been to India many times, also during monsoon season. And oh boy, when it rains there during monsoon, does it ever rain? Buckets and buckets, flooded streets, everything's soaked. Cameras are soaked. You're soaked. But it's the lifeblood of that part of the world. They depend on it.
Any closing words?
I just want to thank you guys so much for the opportunity to come out and share some of my stories. I would much prefer to be there in person, of course. And I certainly want to find myself in Oregon for a number of reasons. Number one, of course, to visit you guys, but also Oregon is one of the only, I'm only missing 2 states. I've been to 48 of the US states except for Oregon and Washington. So I need to do a Pacific Northwest road trip.
Okay, we're here. We're waiting for you.
Awesome. Will do. Absolutely. Thanks so much. And like I said, there's so much more. You can go to furiousearth.com. I'm on all the social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram. Just do a search. You'll find me. I'm easy to